Your wife is also your business partner. Was it a conscious decision or it just happened by luck?
So what happened for Xero Shoes, the way it started, I had gotten back into sprinting. This is about 16 years ago when I was 45 and was getting injured all the time for about 2 years. And a friend of mine suggested that I take off my shoes, see what happened if I learned anything by running barefoot. Read the book Born to Run by Chris McDougall, which talked about the Tarahumara
Mhm.
Indians who run in thin sandals made of scraps of tires or sometimes barefoot as well. And so I went out for my first barefoot run, uh, and I to make a long story short, I discovered that I had a form problem that I couldn't feel when I was wearing a regular shoe. But running barefoot, basically, if you have bad form, it hurts, and good form feels good. And so the first run was a little painful. The second run, I tried to figure out how to change things so it wouldn't be painful. And I found a way to do that. So my injuries then went away. I became faster. So for the last 15 years, I've been a Masters All American sprinter, which means for men in my age
Wow.
group, there's 5 year age groups in track and field, for Masters track and field. I've been one of the
Hmm.
top 15 or 20 fastest guys in the country for the last 15 years. So I wanted this barefoot like experience as often as I could have it. But I got tired of arguing with people about whether it was legal to be in a restaurant in bare feet. By the way, it is. They can have a rule, but it's not illegal. And my wife was getting tired of me coming in with my bare feet onto our white carpeting. So I made a pair of sandals based on a 10,000-year-old design idea, similar to the Tarahumara. And someone said that I've had a, and then I ended up making them for other people. And one day someone said, if you had a website for this sandal making hobby of yours, I could put you in a book that I'm writing. So I rush home and I pitch this incredible opportunity to my wife, who tells me it's a horrible thing, won't work at all, is a waste of
Right.
time, effort, and money, and insisted that I not do it. So I told her I wouldn't, and then she went to bed, and I did. And so I built a website, and she kind of got mad at me, but we had just started a search engine marketing business because I'd been an internet marketer now, for oh gosh, I've been doing it now for over 30 years. So I just said, look, it'll be a good case study for our search engine business. Don't worry about it. But within 6 weeks, it was clear this was going to be our full-time job. And that's when she said, okay,
Hmm.
I'm all in. So I'm a product and marketing person. She's a finance operations kind of person. So
Mm.
we never really
Right.
talked about it. She just realized, oh, if this is going to be real, you need me. And we just jumped in.
One of the main reasons why we were really excited to talk to you is because we both are runners, and especially me, I had a similar story. So a few years ago, Shristi and I, we both were training for a marathon, and for some reason, I believe I had bad form as well, and I would constantly hurt my ankle, my knee, and lower back. And then I looked up online saying what is happening, and that's when I realized about, or rather, that's when I learned about the minimalist movement, people running with barefoot shoes, and I learned about Xero Shoes as well. And since then, I've been wearing Xero Shoes.
Um, there are a lot of runners who just won't think about switching. They're convinced that what we're doing is wrong. They think things like, well, if this was real, this whole barefoot slash minimalist thing was real, then why don't the big shoe companies do it? And the answer to that, by the
Mm.
way, is
Yeah.
because the big shoe companies know that if they were doing something like what we do, they've literally said this to people that we know, that it would be like admitting they've been lying for 50 years, which, by the way, they have been. And I
Mm.
can say more about that in a second. But for people who are going to run in quote normal shoes, regular shoes, there's research showing that if people like that just do an 8 week exercise program for their feet, their risk of injury over the course of a year, it was a year-long study, is reduced by 250%. Now, some people aren't going
Wow.
to do a simple exercise program for their feet. Even if you could do it while you're watching TV, they'll just not do it. So, good news, there's research
Mm.
showing that instead of doing the exercise program, you can build the same amount of strength in your feet just by walking in shoes like ours. So if you want to run in some big
Yeah.
normal, padded shoe, then I'd recommend get out of those shoes as soon as you're done running. Wear something like ours that will build foot strength. That's proven, and this foot strength based on the exercise program, is shown to reduce the risk of injury. Now, there isn't a study yet just showing wear our shoes, have fewer injuries running in regular shoes. But again, do the math. Wearing our shoes builds foot strength as much as the exercise program. The exercise program is the thing that reduced injury risk. So I say,
Mm.
great. And besides, if you do that, then your running shoes won't wear out as fast, because many people just keep wearing their running shoes as their daily shoe, which makes them wear out faster. So you'll get more mileage out of those things. But I will admit there's a bit of a Trojan horse there, because like you said, once you start wearing things like Xero Shoes, at some point you just can't go back, because the comfort of it and the natural movement is just, that's what we're supposed to do. And our body and brain just goes, yeah, that's correct.
Also wanted to ask, when you started Xero Shoes, it looked completely different than what we have now. And I was curious, like, how did you build your 1,000 true fans or your first 1,000 customers? Because it was a do-it-yourself, like, pack or a kit where people had to create their own shoes, but still, like, you grew really fast. So how did you do that?
It was my things that I did that I'll describe. Some of it had nothing to do with me. And the biggest thing that had nothing to do with me was the book Born to Run came out. And when it first came out, it didn't get a lot of attention. But by the end of 2009, it was getting a lot of attention. And so, A, I built a
Mm.
website. B, I made videos showing how to make a sandal based on a 10,000-year-old design, even if you didn't buy the materials from us. Like, here's how to do it. And it was 3 videos, actually, because at the time YouTube limited you to 10 minutes, and so I had to break it down into 3 parts. And so I made that video, and I posted those videos on every video channel, or every video platform there were, and there was like 30 at the time. So I just blanketed the internet with videos. I wrote a number of articles. I posted those everywhere that I could. And then anytime Chris McDougall was doing a book signing somewhere, we'd get a bunch of traffic. And then I started going around, and I'd put our business cards in copies of his book anytime I walked by a bookstore. So little guerrilla marketing there.
Very clever.
It wasn't originally my idea. It was a version of something that someone told me. He self-published a book, and what he would do is he'd go to bookstores and just put a few in the right section. And so when someone picked up the book and took it to go buy it, it wasn't in their computer. So they had to call him to order the book. But the other thing that I did back then, there were very few places to sort of congregate and have a conversation online. Mostly like, what was it called? Not Google Groups. It was a Google thing that doesn't even exist. Kind of like Reddit, basically, but it was a Google thing. And so I got involved in every conversation that I could find about barefoot running and running injuries. And I just tried to provide value. I wasn't trying to sell things. I was just like throwing out my experience, pointing people to our website so that if they did want to try out what I was describing, they could do that. But that was like in my signature line. I was just there to share with people the information. I pointed people to the videos where they could just learn how to do everything that I did for free, and they could replicate what I did. There were a couple of companies that started just by watching my videos and just recreating what I did. Quite comically, they would say, I couldn't find the kind of product that I want, so I had to make my own, and then it's exactly like mine. So I thought that was pretty entertaining. When people are ripping you off, it's sometimes a good sign. And so the early days was just creating content, syndicating it, and getting in places where I could basically a friend of mine has a great line: making money is easy. Find out where the money is flowing and get in the middle of the flow. So another way of thinking about that is find the people who are already interested in what you're doing, get involved in the conversation, and offer something of value.
You mentioned regarding, wearing shoes, right? Wearing minimalist shoes is equivalent to a foot exercise. I believe Dr. Sarah Ridge has a research on that.
That's the one.
One of the key differences that I found after wearing Xero Shoes is that, the veins on the feet kind of popped up.
I mean, if you think of it this way, if you break your arm, and I'm not suggesting you do it, I'm saying if someone were to break their arm, and you put it in a cast, it comes out weaker. I mean, it's not confusing to anybody. And so then you have 2 choices: never use it again, keep it keep it supported, or start using it again and you're going to build strength and muscle. Well, if you haven't been using your feet for a
Right.
long time, same thing happens. If you're in a shoe that's stiff or that squeezes your toes together, you're not using your foot. If you have arch support, you're not using the muscles in your arch. So that's making things weaker, and that will change everything about your foot. It'll change the shape of it. It'll change the circulation patterns. It'll change everything. You start using your foot naturally again, and you'll see changes. I can't make any promises about some of these, but I mean, like for me, I had really
Mm.
crazy flat feet my whole life. And now that's not true. There, I have some arch. Now, arch height is predominantly genetic. Strength, though, is the most important thing. And my feet have gotten really, really strong. So that's, and my foot, as my arch developed, my foot got a little bit shorter and my toes spread a little and got a little wider. So, and some people will
Mm.
find different changes. Some people won't find any change. Some people will find a whole, and there's a whole range of possibilities. But the gist of it is that using your feet naturally is a thing that can build strength. It can help with balance. It can help with agility. I mean, it can help with everything. Feet are your foundation.
Right.
And if you're not using your foundation correctly, if it's shaky because you're on in a regular shoe with foam that breaks down, for example, you can't fix a shaky foundation of your house by changing the curtains. You got to work on the foundation.
Mm. So you mentioned two things: breaking breaking your arm and flat feet. So that brings me to another story of mine. 3 months ago, I was rock climbing and I fell and I my so long story short, after being bedridden for a few months and starting my physiotherapy, the first thing my physiotherapist mentioned is that I have really really flat feet, and I need to get rid of my zero shoes. Buy a shoe that has an arch that can support my, you know, that gonna push my flat feet and make it a little bit more arched. So, what do you have to say for that?
That's ridiculous. The simplest thing I can say, this is going to be tricky. Um, if someone believes they need arch support, what I'm about to say will not convince them that they're wrong, because I'm going to be sharing a piece of data. And here's the thing that we know: facts do not change people's minds. So if someone's listening who believes they need arch
Mhm.
support, my apologies in advance. I know this will not change your mind, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's research from Katrina Protopappas where she took healthy people who had not been using arch support, and then she put arch support in their shoes. And within 12 weeks, they had lost up to 17% of the strength and muscle mass in their feet. Think about it. It's just like putting your arm in a cast. You're not letting your arch function. You're not using those muscles, ligaments, and tendons in your feet. They get weaker.
Mm.
Can you think of a time that weaker is better than stronger? I can't. So now here's the thing with arch support: it can
Right.
feel really good. Why does it feel really good? Because you're not using your muscles, ligaments, and tendons. Lying down feels good because you get to not use things. Lie down long enough and you won't be able to stand up again. So this is the basic thing. And because for the last 50 years, shoe companies have been convincing people that you need arch support and motion control and padding and other things, people believe it. And more, the idea of arch support, when it was invented, it wasn't invented as something that you're supposed to wear full time. It was invented as something you were supposed to wear part time while some injury is healing itself, because it's not letting your foot move. It's like if you're in a car accident and you get whiplash, you put on a neck brace so your head doesn't move while your neck heals. But nobody would suggest you're supposed to wear the neck brace for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Especially, if you said, "Hey, my wrist hurts," and they go, "Oh, that's starting with your neck, so let's put you in a neck brace." Either one of those you'd think was ridiculous, but that's what's happening with arch support. So, ironically, the first thing was arch support was invented just be like a cast for your arm. But once people thought that you could give it to everybody and charge a bunch of money for it, then that was another incentive. But even more than that, the design of the modern athletic shoe creates the kind of stress on your arch that makes you want to have support. Your feet are fully extended when you're not using your arch. That's in a weak position. And if you're running or walking and you land on your heel and let your foot then come to the ground, your foot's fully extended. It's in a weak position when it's supposed to be supporting you in a strong position. So that's like putting the too heavy weight in your fully straight arm versus using your arch and aligning your body like the arm at a 90-degree angle and then having all that weight put on it. So arch support, so the design of the modern shoe puts people's feet in a vulnerable position that can create these problems. And then rather than saying, hey, we messed up, we should make a different shoe, they say, oh, well, actually, they don't even say it. Then there's a multi-billion-dollar industry for arch support. And the research on arch
Yeah.
support, in addition to showing that it makes your feet weaker over time because it's not letting you move, the research shows that arch support only works for about 10% of the people. And a very expensive custom-made orthotic is no better than something you just buy off the shelf for $10 at Walmart. So the research is very clear that arch support is not a solution. And here's the other joke about that. If it was a solution, the shoe companies would just build it all into their shoes the way, instead of having to go out and buy something separate, or they'd be selling those inserts themselves. So you wouldn't be giving your money to some other company. Why haven't they done that? Because it doesn't work.
I was going to ask what started this movement where these billion-dollar companies started to make narrow shoes with a heel height.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'll answer that, but first I have to say what's really funny. Have you watched the movie Air about the Air Jordan shoe?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. No.
When you watch it, pay attention to these three things. One, Phil Knight, who is the CEO of Nike, is often shown walking around barefoot. Thing number two, whenever they show runners, they're running with great form, landing on the ball of their foot underneath their body. They're not overstriding and heel striking with their foot way out in front of them. So they have good form. Three, when they give Michael Jordan the first shoe, they say something like, I'm paraphrasing, we know you like, to be really low to the ground, so we'll shave it off and make it lower for you. So the first Air Jordan was basically a minimalist high top sneaker. So the question, why do shoes look like they do? Why do they look like this with this pointy toe box, etc.? I can answer everything except the pointy toe box. I have no idea why that happened. That was a mystery to me. I like to say to people, is this the shape of your foot? And they go, no. I said, then why are you putting a foot-shaped thing called your foot in a non-foot shaped thing called that shoe? Can you imagine what that might do for you? And they go, oh yeah, that could make me uncomfortable and make it so I can't use my feet. It's like, yeah, why are you doing that? They go, well, that's all there is. I go, oh, that's all there was. So I don't have an answer for that. But for everything else, I do have an answer. If you look at the first Nike waffle trainer, it was basically a minimalist shoe. It was flat. It was about 10 millimeters of foam. That's it. A little bit of rubber underneath there. It still had a kind of pointy toe box, but I don't know why. Not a clue. Maybe easier to make. I have no idea. But it was a minimalist shoe. It was really lightweight. It was wonderful. Then the question, why did they go to this wedged heel, this higher elevated heel? And it's because Bill Bowerman, who created Nike, was complaining to some sports podiatrists or orthopedic podiatrists who were in the same building they were in when they just got started, that he had new runners coming to them who were getting Achilles tendonitis. And the doctor said, oh, it must be because they've been wearing higher heel dress shoes, so their Achilles have shortened. And so if you want to accommodate that, just put a wedge of foam to make a higher heel so it accommodates their Achilles. Okay, so they did that. When you elevate your heel, you end up tending to land on your heel. Your heel is a ball.
Right.
A ball is unstable. So now they had to try to build in motion control. Spoiler alert, if you weigh 150 pounds, for example, and you're running at a normal speed, when you land, you're hitting the ground with 400 to 600 pounds of force. There is no motion control that can accommodate that can do anything about that. None. Secondly, if you've been told that you pronate and that's a problem, you pronate because you're landing on your heel where you have no control. But pronation normally is actually not a problem. It's a made-up problem to sell things like orthotics. That's a longer story. Because if you watch like professional runners who are running often in flat shoes, they may pronate a ton because pronation is actually a part of the spring mechanism of your entire leg, from your hip all the way down to your toes. But anyway, so you have motion control, so you're unstable. You land on your heel, that's unstable. They try to build in motion control to control that. It doesn't work. Then, if you're landing, like we talked about before, on your heel with your foot out in front of you, when your foot comes down, it's fully extended, putting strain on your plantar fascia. So then they build in the arch support. So every part of the modern athletic shoe, except the pointy toe part that I don't understand, is just a
Mm.
result of this original idea of let's put a wedge of foam in there. Cut to the end of this story, where one of those doctors was at a track meet with a friend of mine, a guy who I've actually designed a couple shoes with, who worked directly with Bill Bowerman for about 30 years. And my friend says to this doctor, your idea, making a wedged heel shoe, is now the design basically of every footwear that's been made, performance footwear that's been made ever since. What do you think about that? And the doctor said, it was the biggest mistake we ever made. We had no evidence for this Achilles shortening idea. We had no evidence that putting a wedged heel would be effective. We definitely didn't know it would have the impact that it did, which is causing a bunch of problems. And sorry, I realized the last part though, the footwear industry is predominantly people who are not very creative. And as your business gets bigger, the way people have started shoe companies is just by copying some other shoe and then maybe making a minor change to it at best. Sometimes it's really no different at all, but just marketing, just, different look. They market it to a different audience, just 100% marketing. So it's a bunch of people copying things. So as Nike started selling stuff, everyone else was terrified they'd never sell another shoe. So they started copying that same design.
Mm.
And you see it now. When Hoka came out with a big thick shoe, everyone thought it was ridiculous until Hoka their sales started going way up. And then everyone started copying it as fast as they could. And now the research is coming out showing those things aren't necessarily good for you, because foam is basically tuned to a particular speed and weight. Like all foam sucks energy out of your system, bottom line. It absorbs energy. It doesn't give it back to you. It just sucks energy out. But how badly it sucks energy out of your system depends on how much you weigh and how fast you're running, what your ground contact time is, how much force you're applying to the ground, basically. And if you're not the right weight running at the right speed for a particular type of foam, it really gets in the way badly. So as a sprinter, someone gave me one of those big, thick Nike Vaporflies. I couldn't take 2 steps in it as a sprinter because I'm on the ground for such a short period of time. The foam was still compressing as I'm trying to get off the ground. It literally felt like I was trying to run in quicksand. Someone gave them to me just, because they were curious what happened. And I couldn't take more than 2 steps till I had to take them off.
I also wanted to ask, like, these companies, they have so much money for marketing, and when you started with zero, like nothing. Um, how was it competing with them in a industry that they monopolized for so long?
It's really hard there's certain aspects that are hard, certain aspects that are easy. So the hard part is not that they monopolize it as much as they have spent 40 to 50 years teaching people things that they now believe are true that are not true, that your feet are somehow not built for handling the things you do, that running is inherently painful, that cushioning will help you deal with that, which it doesn't, that arch support is good for, all the things that we talked about. They've convinced people so much that they don't need to advertise those ideas at all. Everyone believes it. So overcoming that is the most challenging thing, because when someone has a belief, this is true for all of us, and someone gives us some information to contradict that belief, our first goal is to prove that person wrong. We hold on to our beliefs. It's part of who we are. And so that's really tricky. So it's a challenging marketing project to find a way to get people to be curious enough to consider that maybe there's a better alternative than what they're currently wearing, without saying you're wrong, without saying that you've been lied to, although you have. It's just a tricky thing to get through the beliefs that people have been taught that are not true. The second thing is these companies have gotten so big that people just have their identity linked to those brands. I'm a Nike guy. I'm an Adidas guy. I'm a whatever. So similarly, that's challenging. And the only opportunity there is just time and experience and performance. And that's just, happens as a company gets to a certain size. And you're working with the kind of people that their customers would like to emulate. I want to be like Mike is sort of one of those ideas from Nike. On the other hand, it's really easy because we are telling such an unusual story, and we can go after the people that are already curious about what we're doing. or B, the biggest thing that sells our product is people putting it on their feet. And so the experience is so profound that word of mouth is the number one thing that drives our sales. So that's easy. All we have to do is keep making good products that change people's lives, and then they take care of the rest. Now, and then we help them do that, and we use some of the things that the content they've created, for example, to help promote what we're doing. So that part's relatively straightforward.
I was also curious, like, how did Xero Shoes get into Shark Tank? How was the process? And did you have a good experience?
Well, in fact, that's another thing about marketing is there's opportunities like that for small companies that are not available to bigger companies. So there's a lot of little things that all add up. The way we got on Shark Tank was after we had started the business, we had a lot of people saying to us, "You should be on Shark Tank," and we didn't know what they were talking about. So we started watching the show, and we're thinking, "Oh yeah, we should totally be on that show," which is what almost everybody thinks when they're watching that show. But we actually had a business, and we were thinking we should be on that show. So I didn't know any better. I looked online, and there were some application ideas, and so I just sent them an email that said we should be on the show. I didn't realize that they actually only looked at those emails during a certain period of time, starting usually around April. And so I waited till April, and I sent another email, and I made a video about who we were, and I sent that in too. And then we got a phone call a little while later on a Thursday in May of 2012, saying, "Hey, we got your email. We're really interested. Let's talk." And we had a really good conversation for about an hour. They said, "We need to get a video of you answering a whole bunch of these questions, just a 5-minute video, no more. And we need it by Tuesday." And I said, "No problem." Not knowing that my wife had been planning a surprise 50th birthday party for me, and she had flown in my family and her, so she was panicked. I had no idea. Party went off fine. I was totally surprised. We shot the video on Sunday. We got it to them on Tuesday. And then there's this really complicated, long application form that needs to be handwritten. And we have horrible handwriting. So we typed out our answers and paid for someone on Craigslist to handwrite it. And after that, they send you a contract, which is very one-sided. And there's nothing you can change about it. You either agree to give up your life story for 3 years or you don't. And we signed the contract, and they said, "All right, we want you on the show." So then they work with you for a few weeks on just crafting that first little 60 to 90 seconds that happens when you're on the show and introducing what you do. And then they called us and said, "We need you out here next week. Jump on a plane." And in the meantime, though, we had read the autobiographies of all the sharks, and we had done practice Shark Tank sessions with friends of ours who were very experienced business people. So we got really good at knowing our numbers, knowing the kind of questions they ask us. We also watched every episode of Shark Tank, every episode of Canadian Dragon's Den, and every episode of British Dragon's Den. We didn't watch the original from Japan. So we had really just steeped ourselves in Shark Tank. And being on the show, it was shocking because first, you're standing very far away from the sharks, unnaturally far away. It's very weird. Mm-hmm. Secondly, when you watch the show, it looks like a conversation, but in real time, it's far from it. Half the time, they're not paying attention to you. They're like making notes or trying to, saying things to each other. One of them will ask you 5 questions, and while you're on answer number 3, another asks you 10 questions. And if you switch, the first one gets mad. And if you don't switch, the second one gets mad. And they're basically trying to keep you off your game the whole time, which didn't really happen for us. We were really clear about what we were doing. But even still, it's not what you see. It's a longer segment that gets to get edited down. So Barbara, for example, hated me she said, "I hated you since the moment you walked out here. You look like my ex-husband. Do you smoke a pipe?" She just went off on how much she hated me. And then she started going to Lena, "What's wrong with you that you're married to this guy?" And Lena was like, what? She wasn't prepared to defend her marriage on national television. So I think the best thing she said was, "Well, he's not always like this," which is not really a way to stand up for me, but that's okay. So it was crazy town. At one point, it became clear that Mark Cuban was a customer of mine when I had Scriptwear, which kind of deflated him a little bit. So that was pretty funny. That does not end up on the show. And at one point, Robert says to me, "So what do you think about those 5-toe shoes?" And I said, "Oh, they've just created a wave of awareness, and we're surfing on that wave." And he jumps out of his chair and yells at me, "You have a perfect answer for every question." And I just look at him I was kind of incredulous. I said, "It's our business." So it was just weird. But it was also kind of fun. And when we were leaving the tank, I just turned to Lena and said, "Wow, that is not what I expected." And we just then waited. So they tape more segments than they actually air. So you don't know if you're going to end up on the show or not until about 2 weeks before the show. They'll call you, but even that doesn't guarantee you're going to be on the show. So we were just waiting. We took a vacation around Christmas time, and in the middle of our vacation, they called, "You're going to be on the show in a couple of weeks." Like, crap. So we were trying to do public relations while we're in Ecuador visiting friends with practically no internet connectivity. So that was a lot of fun. And the show was great for us. I could not be more grateful, because we ended up doing about 3 months worth of sales in the week following the show, which at that time was a big deal. At this time is what we do in 2 days. So it's not, and we're trying to get a follow-up too, because we are one of the most successful companies that it's been on Shark Tank. And it's helped people know who we are, because when they see us in a context that's not a conversation, and in what they think is a very high pressure situation, which I guess for many people it is, it gives them an idea of who we are that is very, very helpful. And that continues to be the case, because they still repeat it on CNBC every couple of months.